Mom handed my sister a deed worth $200,000 right in front of everyone, while I received a pair of socks, after years of quietly carrying this family financially. I did not scream. I just smiled and texted my attorney. They had no idea that the most important gift that night was not wrapped in a box, but buried in the documents they had signed and completely forgotten about. My name is Marina Caldwell, and at 41 years old, I have spent the better part of 2 decades managing crises for other people, as the operations manager for Northvale Strategy Group, a firm that specializes in corporate restructuring and high-stakes logistical pivots. I am paid a very comfortable salary to remain calm when the ceiling is literally falling in. I know how to read a room. I know how to anticipate a disaster before the first alarm bell rings. I know how to look at a spreadsheet and tell you exactly where the bleeding is coming from. Yet, as I drove my rental car through the winding, snow-packed roads of Cedar Hollow, Vermont, I felt that familiar, tightening sensation in my chest that had nothing to do with corporate liability and everything to do with the woman waiting for me at the end of the driveway. Cedar Hollow was beautiful in the way a postcard is beautiful. Frozen, picturesque, and completely two-dimensional. The pines were heavy with fresh snow, and the streetlights cast a warm, amber glow over the pristine driveways of the upper-middle-class neighborhood where I had grown up. It was the kind of setting that promised warmth and reconciliation, the kind of backdrop used in those holiday movies where the workaholic daughter comes home, learns the true meaning of Christmas, and falls in love with a flannel-wearing woodworker. But I was not living in a movie. I was living in the Caldwell family reality, and the script we followed had been written long before I was old enough to understand my lines. I pulled up to the house. It was perfect. Of course it was perfect. My mother, Darlene, treated Christmas decorating like a military campaign. The wreaths on every window were identical. The lights lining the roof were spaced with mathematical precision. There was not a single icicle out of place. It was a house that demanded to be admired, a house that screamed stability and prosperity. It was also a lie. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The heat from the vents was fading, replaced by the creeping chill of the Vermont winter. But I delayed getting out. I needed to armor up. I needed to shift from Marina the daughter, who still desperately wanted to be loved, to Marina the manager, who knew that affection in this house was a currency, and the exchange rate was never in my favor. I told myself this year would be different. I always told myself that. I told myself that the distance I kept during the year, the boundaries I tried to erect, would make the holidays easier. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, the fact that I had bailed them out of the Lake Briar property tax issue 3 months ago without asking for a thank you would earn me a seat at the table that did not feel like a folding chair. It was a foolish hope, the kind that dies hard. When I finally walked through the front door, the wall of heat and the scent of cinnamon and expensive potpourri hit me like a physical blow. The house was aggressively cozy. "Marina, you made it." Darlene's voice floated from the kitchen. She did not come to the door. "Take your shoes off on the mat, please. I just had the carpets done." "Hi, Mom," I called back, kicking off my boots and lining them up perfectly parallel to the wall. I knew the drill. I hung my coat in the closet, noticing that the hangers were already full of cashmere and wool coats that looked far newer and more expensive than mine. I walked into the living room, and there they were, the tableau of the perfect family. My younger sister, Haley, was draped over the beige sectional sofa, holding a glass of white wine. She looked effortlessly beautiful, her hair a cascade of perfect blonde waves, wearing a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my first car. Haley was the golden child, the one who floated through life on a cloud of charisma and good intentions that never quite translated into action. She was 36, but possessed the eternal, unburdened aura of a college sophomore. "Rena!" Haley squealed, not getting up. She waved her wine glass at me. "God, you look tired. Doesn't she look tired? Grant?" My brother, Grant, was standing by the fireplace, one arm resting on the mantel in a pose that suggested he was waiting for a photographer to capture his brooding intellect. Grant was 2 years older than me, charming, handsome, and functionally useless. He had started 4 businesses in the last 10 years, all of which had failed quietly, with the financial cleanup usually falling to unseen hands. Mine. "She works too hard," Grant said, flashing that grin that had gotten him out of speeding tickets and bad investments for decades. "Northvale keeping you late? Or are you just avoiding us?" "Someone has to work," I said, keeping my tone light, trying to joke. It didn't land. It never did. The air in the room shifted slightly, a microscopic drop in temperature. "Don't start with the martyr act, Marina," Darlene said, emerging from the kitchen with a tray of perfectly arranged appetizers. She was 68 and looked 50, thanks to a regimen of expensive creams and a soul that refused to age out of sheer stubbornness. She set the tray down and looked at me. Her eyes didn't crinkle. They scanned. She was checking my clothes, my hair, my bag, assessing my value. "We're just glad you could make time in your busy schedule for your family." "It's Christmas, Mom," I said, walking over to give her a hug. She stiffened slightly, a reflex she probably wasn't even aware of, before patting my back twice, the universal signal for release. "Well, grab a drink," she said, turning back to Haley. "Haley was just telling us about her potential trip to Italy next summer. She's thinking of taking a cooking class in Tuscany." "That sounds expensive," I said, pouring myself a glass of sparkling water. I didn't want a drink. I needed to keep my head clear. "It's an investment in herself," Darlene corrected me sharply. "You of all people should understand the value of broadening one's horizons. Marina, not everything is about the bottom line." I took a sip of water and swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. I wanted to ask who was funding this investment. I wanted to ask if the cooking class would pay the mortgage on the condo Haley was living in, the one where I had covered the association fees for the last 6 months because Haley was between opportunities. But I didn't. I held my tongue. That was my role here. I was the safety net that no one acknowledged, the structure that held up the house so they could focus on the decoration. The evening progressed with a slow, grinding friction. We moved to the dining room, where the table was set with the good china, the plates I had bought Darlene for her 60th birthday, though I doubted she remembered that. The conversation flowed around me, a river of inside jokes and shared anecdotes from the times I wasn't there. Grant talked about a new venture involving sustainable tech, using buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. Darlene nodded raptly, her eyes shining with pride for her son, the visionary. Haley talked about her social circle, name-dropping people in town, laughing about the misfortunes of high school friends. They only turned to me when the topic strayed near money or logistics. "So, Northvale is doing well then?" Grant asked, cutting into his roast beef. "Bonuses were good this year?" "The company is stable," I said, cutting a small piece of potato. "The market is volatile, but we're managing." "Must be nice," Haley sighed, looking at her reflection in her spoon. "To just have that security. I mean, money isn't everything, but it must be nice not to worry." I looked at her, really looked at her. There was no irony in her face. She genuinely believed that she worried about money. She believed it because she had never actually felt the cold wind of having zero balance. She had anxiety about money in the abstract, the way a child fears monsters under the bed, knowing her parents would turn on the lights if she screamed. "Security takes work, Haley," I said softly. "Oh, here we go," Darlene interjected, wiping the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "Let's not turn dinner into a lecture. Marina, we're having a nice time." I didn't say, "You have a tone," Darlene said, her voice dropping to that dangerous soft register that used to make my stomach turn when I was 10. "You come in here with this air, like you're judging everyone. Just because you chose a career over a life doesn't make you better than your sister." The silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. A career over a life. That was how she saw it. My long hours, my sacrifices, the checks I wrote to keep the family vacation home from being foreclosed on. The tuition help for Grant's kids from his first marriage. That wasn't love. That wasn't life. That was just me being cold. Me being a machine. I didn't mean to judge. I lied. I put my fork down. The food tasted like sawdust. We just want everyone to be happy, Grant said, playing the peacemaker while risking absolutely nothing. It's Christmas Eve. Let's focus on the good stuff. Mom, the roast is incredible. Thank you, Grant. Darlene beamed, the tension evaporating from her shoulders instantly as she turned to her son. I went to that butcher you like, over in the next town. I know you appreciate quality. I watched them. I watched the way they leaned toward each other, a closed circuit of warmth that I could observe but not join. I looked around the room. The decorations were flawless. The garland on the mantel was lush and green, but as I looked closer, I saw the cracks I wasn't supposed to see, the paint peeling slightly in the corner of the ceiling, a repair I had told Darlene needed to be done properly, but she had hired a cheap handyman friend of Haley's instead. The wine Grant was drinking, a vintage I knew he couldn't afford, which meant he had probably charged it to the joint account Darlene still kept for emergencies, the one I deposited $500 into every month. They were eating the food I paid for, in the house I helped maintain, drinking the wine I subsidized, and telling me I was the one who didn't understand family. Towards the end of the meal, the conversation shifted to the future. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the estate, Darlene said casually, pouring more gravy. About the future of the family. It's important to have things settled, to make sure the people who need support get it. I looked up. What do you mean? Darlene didn't look at me. She looked at Haley. Just making sure things are fair. In the grand scheme of things, you know, Marina, you've always been so independent, so capable. It's a blessing, really. You don't need anyone. Everyone needs someone, Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, well, she waved her hand dismissively, but some need more help than others. It's about equity, not equality. It's about being sensible. I think you of all people can appreciate a sensible decision. You're so logical. Sensible. The word hung in the air like smoke, in the lexicon of Darlene Caldwell. Sensible was a code word. It meant someone was about to get screwed, and it was usually me. It meant I was expected to absorb a blow because I was strong enough to take it. I hope you'll understand, she added, finally meeting my eyes. Her gaze was flat, challenging. When we open gifts later, I hope you'll see the logic in it. I'm sure I will, I said. My stomach twisted. I knew, with the instinct of a woman who has scanned legal contracts for loopholes for 20 years, that something terrible was coming. This wasn't just about a bad gift. This was a realignment. After dinner, while Haley and Grant went to the sunroom to check the sound system for music, which really meant looking at their phones and vaping where Mom wouldn't see, I stayed behind to help clear the table. Leave it, Darlene said, stopping my hand as I reached for a platter. The cleaning service comes tomorrow. Go sit down. You look like you're inspecting the silverware for defects. I withdrew my hand. I just wanted to help. You help best by relaxing, Marina, she said. It sounded like an order. I walked into the living room and stood by the massive Christmas tree. It was 12 feet tall, laden with hundreds of ornaments. Some were heirlooms, glass balls from Germany that had belonged to my grandmother. Others were newer. I looked at a specific branch near the top. There was a silver star I had bought with my first paycheck from my first real job when I was 22. I remembered bringing it home, so proud that I could contribute something shiny to the family collection. Now it was just one of many, lost in the clutter. I looked at the pile of gifts beneath the tree. There was a large, flat envelope sitting prominently in the front, wrapped in gold paper with a massive red bow. It had Haley's name on it. Next to it was a small, unassuming box wrapped in plain green paper with my name scrawled in Darlene's cramped handwriting. I felt a coldness settle over me that had nothing to do with the snow outside. The tree, with its lights and its staged perfection, suddenly didn't look like a celebration. It looked like a set piece, a stage. And on this stage, everyone had a role. Haley was the princess. Grant was the prince. Darlene was the director. And me? I was the stagehand, the one in black who moves the furniture in the dark so the stars don't trip, the one who makes sure the lights stay on but never steps into the spotlight. I stared at that gold envelope. I didn't know exactly what was in it, but I knew what it represented. It was the receipt for my erasure. I took a deep breath, the scent of pine filling my lungs, and adjusted my blazer. If they wanted a performance, I would give them one. But they had forgotten that even stagehands have access to the breaker box, and if pushed far enough, we can turn out the lights. "All right, everyone. Places," Mom announced, clapping her hands once with a sharp, percussive sound that cut through the low murmur of jazz playing from the speakers. It was not a request. It was the curtain call for the main event. We migrated from the dining room to the living room, taking our assigned spots. Mom sat in the high-backed velvet armchair that she referred to as her throne without a hint of irony. Grant sprawled on the rug near the fire, trying to look boyish and rugged despite being 43 years old and wearing a sweater that cost $400. Haley curled up on the sofa, tucking her legs beneath her, looking wide-eyed and expectant. I took the stiff wooden chair near the bookshelf, the one that usually held a decorative fern. It felt appropriate. I was just another piece of the scenery, functional but easily moved aside. "We are going to do this properly," Mom said, picking up a silver letter opener. "Age before beauty? No. I think we will go by need and merit. Let's start with the special one." She reached under the tree and pulled out the gold envelope I had been staring at earlier. It was thick, heavy cardstock, the kind used for wedding invitations or subpoenas. She held it with both hands, presenting it to Haley like a sacred relic. "For you, my darling," Mom said, her voice trembling with an emotion that felt rehearsed, "because I know how hard you have been trying to find your footing this year, and I wanted to give you something that says I believe in you." Haley gasped, pressing her hands to her chest. "Mom, you didn't have to." "Open it," Grant urged, leaning forward on his elbows. "The suspense is killing me." Haley broke the wax seal. Yes, actual wax, and slid out a folded document. She unfolded it slowly. I watched her eyes scan the page. Her brow furrowed, then cleared, then shot up in genuine shock. She covered her mouth with her hand. Is this real?" she whispered. "Read it," Mom commanded, beaming. "It is a warranty deed," Haley read, her voice shaking, "for the property at 42 Maple Ridge Lane." The room went silent. I knew that address. It was a townhouse complex on the north side of town. A solid investment property that had been renovated 2 years ago. It was a rental unit, fully occupied, generating a passive income stream that most people would kill for. "It is yours," Mom said softly, free and clear. "I transferred the title last week. It is worth $200,000. Haley, and it generates $1,800 a month in rent. It is your safety net. Now you don't have to worry about your roommates or your auditions. You have something that is just yours." Grant let out a low whistle. "Whoa, that is huge. Mom, seriously huge. Congrats. Hails, you're a landlord now." Haley started to cry. The pretty, tearful display of a beauty queen accepting a crown. She launched herself off the sofa and fell into Mom's lap, hugging her fiercely. "Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. I don't know what to say. This changes everything." "You deserve it," Mom cooed, stroking Haley's hair. "You have such a good heart, and the world is so tough. I just wanted to make sure you were safe." I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap. I was running the math in my head. $200,000. That was the asset value. But the liquidity? The tax implications? Who had paid for the transfer taxes? And more importantly, where had the capital come from to buy it in the first place? Mom lived on a fixed income from Dad's life insurance and a dwindling investment portfolio, or so she constantly claimed whenever the heating bill arrived. The applause died down. Haley wiped her eyes, clutching the deed to her chest like it was a newborn baby. She looked at me, her eyes shining. "Isn't it amazing, Marina?" she asked. It is very generous, I said. My voice was steady. Congratulations, Haley. Okay, settle down, Mom said, basking in the afterglow of her benevolence. She turned her gaze to me. The warmth in her eyes cooled by several degrees. It was subtle, like the sun going behind a cloud, but I felt the temperature drop. Marina, she said. She reached under the tree again. She bypassed the beautifully wrapped boxes and picked up the small, square package wrapped in plain green paper. It was light. I could tell by the way she lifted it with 2 fingers. She walked over and handed it to me. She did not hug me. She did not make a speech about my heart or my safety. Go on, she said. I peeled back the tape. There was no box inside, just tissue paper. I pulled the tissue apart. Inside lay a pair of gray wool socks. They were not designer socks. They were not hand-knit by artisans in Peru. They were standard, heavy-duty, thermal hiking socks, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at a hardware store for $12. I stared at the gray wool. The fibers looked scratchy. They are thermal, Mom explained, her voice brisk and practical. I know you are always complaining about the heating in your apartment in the city, or maybe it was your office. I forget, but you are practical. Marina, you don't like fuss. I saw those and thought, that is exactly what Marina needs. Something useful. The silence that followed was different from the silence that greeted Haley's gift. That silence had been awe. This silence was awkwardness. Even Grant looked down at the carpet, suddenly finding the weave fascinating. Socks, I said. It was not a question. It was a verification of reality. High-quality ones, Mom added defensively. And look, Marina, let's be honest. You buy yourself whatever you want. If you want a purse, you buy a purse. If you want a trip, you book a trip. You are established. You are successful. You don't need me to give you a hand up like your sister does. So because I work, I said slowly, lifting my eyes to meet hers, I get socks. Because you are strong, Mom corrected, her tone hardening. Don't twist this into something ugly. Haley needs security. You are security. You have always been the one who can take care of herself. It is a compliment. Really. I don't have to worry about you. I don't have to worry about you. The words landed like stones. She didn't mean she trusted me. She meant she didn't want to think about me. I was the appliance that ran in the background, keeping the food cold and the water hot. Only noticed when I broke down. Haley was the art on the walls, there to be admired and protected. It is a very practical gift, Grant offered weakly. I mean, Vermont gets cold, right? Right, I said. I placed the socks back on the tissue paper. I did not say thank you. I could not force the words past the blockade in my throat. Haley was still clutching her deed. She looked from the socks to her $200,000 piece of paper, and for a second, she had the grace to look embarrassed. She bit her lip, shifting her weight. I mean, Marina, if you want, we can swap? Just kidding. She laughed. It was a nervous, tittering sound. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the flicker in her eyes. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was relief, and beneath the relief, a tiny, sharp glint of victory. She liked this. She liked being the chosen one. She liked that the hierarchy was being physically demonstrated with legal documentation. She wasn't offering to swap. She was gloating, disguised as a joke. No, keep it, I said. You need it. I turned back to Mom. The question had been burning in my mind since the deed appeared, and now, with the insult of the socks sitting on my lap, I couldn't keep it in. Mom, I asked, keeping my voice level. Where did the deed come from? You said you transferred it. When did we buy a townhouse on Maple Ridge Lane? I used the word we instinctively, because for the last 10 years, we had been a financial unit. I paid the property taxes on the main house. I paid for the roof repairs in 2018. I paid off Grant's car loan when he got divorced. Mom waved her hand, a sharp, cutting motion through the air. Oh, stop it. Don't start interrogating me. It was an investment I made years ago, before your father passed. I just held on to it. for the right time. You held on to a rental property for years without telling anyone? I pressed. Who was managing it? Who was collecting the rent? It is adult business. Marina, she snapped. Her eyes flashed with warning. Not everything has to go through your little spreadsheet. I am capable of managing my own assets. This is about Haley. Why can't you just be happy for your sister without making it about your need to control everything? I am just asking. You are ruining the moment, Haley interjected, her voice petulant. Seriously, Rena, can't you just let me have this? Why do you always have to be so actuary about everything? Actuary, I corrected automatically, and I am not ruining anything. I am just surprised. Well, be surprised quietly, Mom said. She stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. Grant, pour everyone some eggnog. We need to toast Haley's new chapter. I sat there as the room moved on without me. Grant scrambled to get the crystal glasses. Mom went to the stereo to turn up the volume on Silent Night. Haley was busy taking a photo of the deed with her phone, presumably to post on social media with a caption about blessings and manifestation. I looked down at the socks on my lap. I ran my thumb over the rough wool. You don't need help. You can take care of yourself. That was the narrative. I was the strong one. I was the bank. I was the fixer. And my reward for competence was erasure. My mind drifted back. 6 months ago, I transferred $5,000 to Mom's account because she said the boiler had broken. She never sent me the invoice from the repairman. 1 year ago, I paid $12,000 for Haley's emergency dental surgery because she didn't have insurance. 3 years ago, I paid off the $25,000 lien on the lake house because Mom had forgotten to pay the association fees for 5 years running. I looked at the socks. They were gray, dull, functional. And they were the most expensive gift I had ever received because they cost my family my loyalty. I didn't feel the heat of anger anymore. The burning sensation in my chest had cooled into something hard and sharp, like a diamond. I felt incredibly calm. It was the calm of a person who finally understands the terms of the contract they have been unknowingly signing for decades. They wanted me to be independent? Fine. They wanted me to stop worrying about their finances? Done. They wanted me to be a separate entity, distinct from the warm, soft, subsidized center of the family. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Under the table, shielded by the folds of my skirt, I unlocked the screen. I did not open my banking app. I opened my contacts. I scrolled down to L. Liam, attorney. I typed a single message. I need you to clear your schedule for tomorrow morning. I have a job for you. It concerns the Caldwell estate. I hit send. Then, I picked up the socks. I held them up, inspecting them as if they were a rare artifact. Thank you, Mom, I said, my voice cutting through the music. You are right. These are exactly what I needed. My feet have been getting cold lately. But don't worry. I think I know exactly how to warm them up now. Mom smiled at me, a tight, satisfied smile. She thought she had won. She thought she had put me in my place and I had accepted it. Good, she said. I knew you would understand. She had no idea. I understood perfectly. And as I watched Haley pose with her $200,000 piece of paper, I realized that paper was not a gift. It was evidence, and court was about to be in session. We moved back to the dining table for dessert, a transition that felt less like a family tradition and more like a mandatory scene change in a play where the actors had forgotten why they liked each other. The pecan pie, store-bought, though Mom had transferred it to a glass dish to pretend otherwise, sat in the center of the table. I picked up my fork. I told myself to just eat the pie. I told myself to taste the sugar and the nuts and ignore the fact that the air in the room had become so thick with unspoken things that it was hard to breathe. For the first 5 minutes, no one looked at me. It was a fascinating display of collective avoidance. Grant stared intently at his coffee cup as if trying to divine the future from the dark liquid. Haley was scrolling through her phone under the table, the blue light illuminating her chin, probably checking the engagement on the photo of her new deed. Mom was busy cutting slices, the knife scraping against the glass with a sound that set my teeth on edge. I took a bite. It was cloyingly sweet. "So," I said, forcing my voice to be casual, trying to salvage some semblance of normalcy for the sake of the holiday. "What time are we doing breakfast tomorrow?" "I brought the ingredients for the strata you like, Grant." I expected a simple answer, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Instead, the question seemed to land in the center of the table like a grenade. Grant glanced at Mom. Haley stopped scrolling and looked at her plate. Mom set the serving knife down with a deliberate, slow click. She looked at me, and her expression was one of weary patience, the kind a parent gives a toddler who keeps asking why the sky is blue. "Marina," she sighed, folding her hands on the tablecloth. "Honestly, can we just relax? You are always so focused on the schedule, on what is next. It is exhausting." "I just asked about breakfast," I said, baffled. "I need to know when to wake up to start cooking." "That is exactly what I mean," Mom said, shaking her head. "You try so hard to make yourself indispensable, cooking, organizing, buying things. You act like if you don't control every minute of the holiday, the world will end." I put my fork down. "I thought you liked the strata. You ask for it every year." "I like it," Grant muttered, though he didn't look up. "It is not about the strata," Mom said, her voice sharpening. She leaned forward slightly. "It is about the dynamic. Marina, you come home, and you bring this weight with you. You sit there with your silent judgments and your expensive blazer, waiting for us to thank you for merely existing. It creates tension. Look at your brother. Look at your sister. Everyone is walking on eggshells." I looked around the table. Grant was still studying his coffee. Haley was watching me with wide, innocent eyes, looking for all the world like a victim of my oppression. "I haven't said anything," I said, feeling the reality of the room warping around me. "I have barely spoken since we opened gifts." "That is the point," Mom said. "Your silence is loud. It screams that you think you are better than us, that you are the martyr." She paused, taking a sip of her wine, preparing the kill shot. "You know, Marina, at some point, you really need to stop relying on this family." I froze. The words hung in the air, absurd and grotesque. "Excuse me?" I whispered. "You heard me," Mom continued, gaining confidence from the silence of the others. "You rely on us to give you a sense of purpose. You use your money and your logistics to try and buy a place here, to make us feel indebted to you so you can feel superior. But emotionally, you are the needy one. You need us to be a mess so you can be the savior. It is a very unhealthy form of codependency, and frankly, I am tired of it. You need to stop relying on us to validate your life choices." I sat there, stunned into absolute stillness. "Stop relying on us." The phrase echoed in my head, bouncing off the memories of the last decade. I thought of the check I wrote to the Internal Revenue Service in 2015, when Mom forgot to file her taxes for 3 years. I thought of the car payments I made for Grant when his startup folded and he was at risk of losing his vehicle, which meant he couldn't drive his kids to school. I thought of the tuition I paid for Haley's acting classes in New York, the ones she quit after 2 months because the instructor was too negative. I thought of the roof over our heads right now. The shingles were paid for by my bonus in 2020. The furnace keeping us warm was installed because I wired the money directly to the contractor when Mom called me crying that she was freezing. I was the structural integrity of this family. I was the foundation, the walls, and the roof. And she was sitting there, eating the pie I probably paid for in a roundabout way, telling me I was the parasite. "I rely on you?" I repeated, my voice steady but cold. "Mom, do you have any idea?" "See?" Grant cut in. Finally looking up, his face was flushed, defensive. "This is what she means. Marina, you get so defensive. You instantly go to that place where you want to list everything you've ever done. It is transactional with you. That is why it is so stressful." "It is not transactional to state facts," I said. "Facts matter. Grant, "You are just so intense," he said, shaking his head. "Mom is right. You come in here and the whole vibe changes. We were having a great time with Haley's news, and now you are making it about whatever this is. Why can't you just be chill? Why do you always have to be the manager?" I looked at my brother, the boy I had protected on the playground, the man I had bailed out of financial ruin twice. He wasn't defending me. He was throwing me to the wolves to save his own skin. He knew that if Mom turned her focus on him, he would crumble. So he helped her target me. It was survival of the fittest, and in this house, the fittest was the one who could flatter Darlene Caldwell the best. Then Haley spoke up, and that was the moment the ground truly fell out from under me. She reached across the table and placed her hand on my arm. Her skin was soft, uncalloused by work. Her manicure was perfect. "Rena," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet concern. "Look, I know it must be hard, watching everyone else move forward while you're just working all the time. But seriously, if you are struggling, like financially or emotionally, you can tell us. I mean, now that I have the rental property." She paused to let that sink in, a small, cruel smile touching her lips. "If you need help, I can help you. I'm going to have income now, so you don't have to act like this. You don't have to be jealous." The room seemed to tilt. The gaslighting was complete. They had rewritten reality so thoroughly that up was down, black was white, and the sister who had never paid a utility bill in her life was offering charity to the operations manager of a multi-million-dollar firm. She wasn't offering help. She was asserting dominance. She was telling me that with one piece of paper from Mom, she had surpassed me. She was signaling that my years of sacrifice meant nothing, because Mom had simply decided to crown her the winner. I looked at Haley's hand on my arm. It felt like a branding iron. I looked at Mom. She was watching me with a look of challenge, daring me to explode, daring me to scream about the money, about the sacrifices, because if I did, if I raised my voice, I would prove her point. I would be the crazy one. I would be the one making a scene. They had trapped me. If I spoke the truth, I lost. If I stayed silent, I lost. There was only one move left. I carefully removed Haley's hand from my arm. I did not squeeze it. I did not shove it. I just lifted it and placed it back on the table, like a napkin I no longer needed. I pushed my chair back. The sound of the wood scraping against the floor was loud in the quiet room. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Grant asked, his voice wavering slightly. He sensed the shift. He knew, deep down, that something vital was breaking, even if he didn't have the courage to name it. "I'm leaving," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice was devoid of any inflection. It was the voice I used when I fired someone for embezzlement. Dispassionate, final, and absolute. "Don't be ridiculous," Mom scoffed, picking up her fork again. "We haven't even had coffee. You are not driving back to the city at this hour. It is Christmas Eve." "I am going to a hotel," I said. "I will not be staying here tonight." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Mom slammed her fork down. "Now you are just being dramatic. This is exactly what I was talking about. Marina, the theatrics. You are doing this to punish us. You want us to beg you to stay so you can feel important." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I saw the lines around her mouth, the fear behind her eyes that she masked with aggression. She needed me to stay, not because she loved me, but because she needed a punching bag. She needed a scapegoat to make the other two look golden. A family like this requires a villain to function, and I had just resigned from the role. "I don't want you to do anything," I said. "I am just done." "If you walk out that door," Mom said, her voice rising, shaking with a sudden, genuine panic, "don't expect us to chase you. You are ruining Christmas. Marina, you are making a choice to separate yourself from this family." "I think that choice was made a long time ago," I said. "I just finally signed the paperwork." I turned and walked out of the dining room. "Marina," Grant called after me. But he didn't get up. I could hear the scrape of his chair, but no footsteps followed. "Let her go," I heard Haley say, her voice muffled but distinct. "She just wants attention. She'll be back in the morning with the strata. She always is." I walked into the hallway. I put on my coat. I put on my boots. I wrapped my scarf around my neck. My movements were mechanical, precise. I didn't look at the living room, at the tree, at the gray socks still sitting on the chair where I had left them. They could keep the socks. They could keep the strata ingredients in the fridge. They could keep the illusion. I opened the front door. The cold air of Vermont hit me like a slap, sharp and cleansing. It was 5 degrees below zero, but it felt better than the stifling heat of that house. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked to my car. The sky was black and endless, dotted with stars that didn't care about deeds or debts or mothers who loved conditionally. I got into my rental car and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the freezing steering wheel. I looked back at the house. The windows were glowing with warm, yellow light. It looked perfect. It looked like a home. But as I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, I realized the truth that had taken me 41 years to accept. I hadn't been driven out of my home. I had just left a house where I was never a resident, only a utility. I was the electricity, unseen and expected, until the moment I decided to cut the line. I drove away into the dark, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I had a meeting to prepare for, and unlike my family, my lawyer would be on time. The drive from Cedar Hollow back to Hartford took 2 hours and 40 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. I did not listen to a podcast. I drove in absolute silence. The only sound, the rhythmic thrum of the tires against the asphalt and the hum of the heater battling the Connecticut winter. My mind, usually a chaotic storm of family obligations and work deadlines, was eerily quiet. It was the silence of a factory floor after the machinery has been shut down for good. I arrived at my apartment building shortly after midnight. It was a modern complex, glass and steel, with a concierge who knew my name and a lobby that smelled of expensive sanitizer rather than cinnamon and guilt. I walked into my unit, hung my coat in the closet, and kicked off my boots. The apartment was cold, but it was a clean cold. It was the temperature I had set on the thermostat, not a chill generated by emotional neglect. I did not go to the kitchen to pour a drink. I did not go to the bathroom to wash my face and cry into a towel. I went straight to my home office. I sat down at my desk, a slab of reclaimed oak that I had bought for myself 3 years ago, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, a stark white light in the dark room. I didn't turn on the overhead lamp. The blue glow was enough. I logged into my primary banking portal. For years, I had treated my finances like a triage unit. Money flowed in from my salary, and I directed it to where the bleeding was worst. Usually, that meant Cedar Hollow. But tonight, I wasn't looking to patch a wound. I was looking to conduct an autopsy. I pulled up the recurring payments tab. It was a list I hadn't scrutinized in a long time. I had set most of these up on autopay years ago to save myself the headache of Mom calling me in a panic because the lights were about to be turned off. It was easier to pay than to listen to the drama. That was the trap. They capitalized on my desire for efficiency. I scanned the list. Vermont Power and Light, $350 a month on average. Cedar Hollow Water District, $80 a month. Northeast Cable and Internet, $240 a month. That was the premium package. Grant needed high-speed internet for his projects, and Mom needed her crime dramas. Green Mountain Landscaping, $150 a month. State Farm Insurance, bundle, $400 a month. That covered the house, Mom's car, and I squinted at the screen. Grant's truck. I sat back in my chair. I pulled up the calculator app. I started punching in numbers. Monthly, I was sending roughly $1,200 just in utilities and services to a house I didn't live in. That was $14,400 a year. Over the last 10 years, that was nearly $150,000. And that didn't include the emergencies, the roof, the boiler, the dental work, the bailouts. I stared at the total sum on the screen. It was a staggering number. It was a down payment on a house. It was a retirement fund. It was a trip around the world. But more than the money, it was what the money represented. I had told myself for years that I was helping. I told myself I was being a good daughter, a responsible sister. I was wrong. I wasn't helping. I was enabling. I had created a biosphere where they could survive without ever developing the skills to breathe on their own. I was the artificial lung, and they were treating me like an annoyance because the machine hummed too loudly. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice sounded flat in the empty room. I moved my cursor to the first line item, Vermont Power and Light. I clicked Cancel Autopay. A warning box popped up. "Are you sure? This may result in late fees or service interruption." I clicked Confirm. I moved to the next one, Northeast Cable and Internet. Cancel. Confirm. I worked my way down the list with the precision of a surgeon removing necrotic tissue. I didn't feel malicious. I didn't feel gleeful. I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if I were cutting sandbags off a hot air balloon. Landscaping, gone. Water, gone. Insurance, gone. I paused at the insurance. I would have to notify them about that one legally, to avoid liability, but the autopay was done. I would send the transfer notice tomorrow. If Grant wanted his truck insured, he could pay the premium. He was 43. It was time. Once the recurring payments were dismantled, I closed the browser tab. I wasn't done. I opened my File Explorer and navigated to a folder labeled Legal, Personal. I clicked through the subfolders until I found one dated 4 years ago, Lake Briar Renovation. The Lake Briar house was a small vacation cabin that had been in Dad's family for 2 generations. 4 years ago, it had fallen into disrepair. The foundation was cracking, and the roof was leaking. Mom wanted to save it, but she didn't have the money. Grant certainly didn't. So, as always, they looked to me. I had put up $80,000 for the renovation. It was a massive chunk of my savings at the time, but unlike the utility bills, which were informal, this had involved contractors and permits, and because the amount was so high, my lawyer, Liam, had insisted on paperwork. I remembered the argument. Mom had cried, saying I didn't trust her. Grant had called me paranoid, but Liam had been adamant. "It is a capital improvement on an asset you don't hold the deed to. Marina, we need a security agreement." I opened the PDF file of the contract. I scrolled past the scope of work, past the contractor bids, down to the addendums. There it was. Clause 482, Conditional Reversion of Rights. I read the text, my eyes scanning the legal jargon that I had glossed over 4 years ago because I just wanted the fighting to stop. In the event that the primary investor, Marina Caldwell, provides funding in excess of 50% of the property's assessed value for improvements, said investor retains a priority lien on the property. Furthermore, should the property owner, Darlene Caldwell, attempt to alter the ownership structure, refinance, or leverage the property without the express written consent of the investor, or should the property fall into arrears regarding tax or maintenance, full executive control and power of attorney regarding the property's management shall revert immediately to the investor to protect the capital interest. I stopped breathing for a second. I read it again. Should the property owner attempt to alter the ownership structure, I thought about the deed Mom had handed Haley tonight, the townhouse on Maple Ridge Lane. Mom had said she bought it years ago and held on to it, but where did the money come from? Mom didn't have $200,000 sitting around. Unless she had leveraged the Lake Briar house. If Mom had taken out a home equity line of credit or a second mortgage on Lake Briar to buy that townhouse for Haley, she had violated the contract. She had leveraged the asset I had paid to fix. And if she had done that, she had triggered Clause 4.2. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the cold clarity of a chess player realizing their opponent has walked directly into a mate in 3. I took a screenshot of the clause. I opened a new email draft. I attached the renovation contract. I attached the bank statements showing my $80,000 transfer. I attached the screenshot of the clause. Then, I did something else. I logged into the county clerk's online portal. It was public record. I searched for the Lake Briar property. There it was, a recording from 3 years ago, mortgage lien, and another one from 6 months ago, refinance. Mom hadn't just leveraged it once. She had been using the lake house, the house I saved, as her personal piggy bank, and she had done it without my consent, triggering the immediate reversion of control. I printed everything. The printer hummed and whirred, a rhythmic sound of war drums. I organized the papers into a neat stack. I wasn't preparing to save the lake house for them. I was preparing to take it. I opened my email client again and typed in Liam's address. Subject: Urgent, Caldwell Estate, Lake Briar Breach. Liam: I need you available tomorrow morning at 9. I am invoking the reversion clause on the Lake Briar contract. Darlene leveraged the property without consent. I have the county records. Also, I am severing all informal financial ties effective immediately. Prepare a cease and desist regarding any further financial requests. Merry Christmas. Marina. I hit send. I sat there for a moment, the adrenaline fading into a dull, heavy exhaustion. I reached into the pocket of my coat, which was draped over the back of my chair. My fingers brushed against something rough. I pulled them out. The gray wool socks. I must have shoved them into my pocket when I stood up from the table, a subconscious reflex to take the only thing that was technically mine. I looked at them. They were ugly. They were cheap. They were scratchy. I cleared a space on my desk, moving the sleek modern mouse pad aside. I placed the socks in the center of the dark wood, directly on top of the stack of printed legal documents. They looked ridiculous sitting there, a pair of hardware store socks resting on top of a foreclosure of a family dynasty. But they were perfect. They were the evidence. They were the symbol of exactly what I was worth to them. They were the catalyst. I stood up and turned off the desk lamp. The room plunged into darkness, save for the blinking green light of the router in the corner, the only internet bill I would be paying from now on. I walked to my bedroom. I didn't brush my teeth. I stripped off my clothes, put on my pajamas, and climbed into bed. Usually, after a fight with my family, I would lay awake for hours, replaying the conversation, wondering what I did wrong, wondering how I could fix it, wondering if I was too harsh. Tonight, I closed my eyes. I thought about the canceled autopays. I thought about the clause 4.2. I thought about the look on Mom's face when she realized her ATM had not only stopped dispensing cash but had just swallowed her card. I fell asleep in 3 minutes. It was the deepest, most peaceful sleep I had had in 20 years. Christmas morning in my apartment was silent. It was a beautiful, curated silence. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. There was no wrapping paper to clean up. There were no forced smiles. There was just me, a cup of premium black coffee, and the peace of a woman who had finally resigned from her unpaid job as the family crisis manager. I sat at my kitchen island, scrolling through the news on my tablet. I was halfway through an article about global supply chain disruptions when my phone buzzed against the marble counter. It was 9:30 in the morning, right on cue. The caller ID displayed Haley. I let it ring 3 times. In the past, I would have picked up on the first ring, assuming she had a flat tire or a broken heart. Today, I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness, before sliding my finger across the screen. "Merry Christmas, Haley," I said. My voice was bright, polite, and completely hollow. Why did I just get an email from the condo association saying my payment was declined? Haley didn't bother with a greeting. Her voice was shrill, the panic of a child who realizes the candy jar is empty. "I assume because the payment was declined," I said calmly. "Don't play dumb, Rena," she snapped. "You pay that. It is on autopay. It has been on autopay for 3 years. I'm trying to order breakfast and I checked my balance and I have like $40 because I thought you covered the association fee, so I spent my cash on gifts." "I canceled the autopay last night," I said. There was a pause on the line, a silence so profound I could almost hear the gears in her head grinding against the rust of entitlement. You What? I canceled it, I repeated. And the insurance on your car? And the phone bill? You should probably check your data plan usage. Are you insane? Her voice jumped an octave. You can't just do that. It is Christmas. I have bills due. I know, I said. But remember last night? You have that warranty deed now. $200,000 in assets. You are a property owner. Haley, a landlord. I figured a woman of your financial standing would be embarrassed to have her older sister paying her bills. I did it out of respect for your new status. That is not liquid cash, she shrieked. I can't pay the HOA with a piece of paper. Mom said that property is for my future. Then I guess the future is now, I said. Welcome to the real estate market. Cash flow is king. I am telling Mom, she threatened, reverting instantly to the playground tactics that had worked for 36 years. Please do, I said. Tell her I said Merry Christmas. I hung up. I didn't have to wait long for the second act. 3 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. Mom. I put the phone on speaker and set it down next to my coffee cup. I didn't want to hold the toxicity against my ear. Marina Caldwell. Darlene's voice boomed into my kitchen. She used my full name only when she was about to deliver a verdict. What on earth do you think you are doing? Drinking coffee, I said. It is a Colombian roast, very smooth. Do not get smart with me, she hissed. Haley is in tears. She says you cut her off, and I just got a notification from the power company that my auto pay was deactivated. On Christmas Day. Marina, you are trying to shut off the heat in your mother's house on Christmas? The heat won't shut off today. Mom, I said, leaning back in my chair. It takes at least 2 billing cycles of non-payment before they disconnect service. You have plenty of time to add your own card. That is not the point, she yelled. The point is that you are being vindictive. You are punishing us because you didn't like your gift. You are throwing a tantrum because you are jealous of your sister. I am not jealous, I said, and I am not punishing you. I am listening to you. What are you talking about? Last night, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly even, at the dinner table. You looked me in the eye and told me that I needed to stop relying on the family. You said my financial involvement was a way for me to feel superior. You said it was an unhealthy codependency. I didn't mean... You were very clear, I interrupted. You said I rely on you to validate my life. So, I did some self-reflection on the drive home, and I realized you were right. I need to stand on my own 2 feet. So I removed myself from the equation. I am breaking the cycle of codependency. Mom, you should be proud of me. I am finally growing up. There was a sputtering sound on the other end. It was the sound of a manipulator realizing their own weapon had been turned against them. She had used the independence argument to shame me, never dreaming I would use it to bankrupt her. This is financial abuse, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Abandoning your family, after everything we have done for you. Everything you have done for me? I asked. Like the socks? Those were high-quality wool. Mom, I said, I am done. The accounts are closed. If you want the utilities on, pay them. If Haley wants her condo, she can use the rent from her new townhouse. You are all capable adults. I believe in you. You are ruining Christmas, she spat. Don't bother coming to Easter or Thanksgiving. Okay, I said. I'll save the travel money. I ended the call. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was the feeling of a heavy backpack being dropped after a 10-mile hike. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty city streets. My phone chimed with a text message. It was Grant, of course, the diplomat, the one who never got his hands dirty but always wanted to smooth over the crime scene. I picked up the phone. It was a block of text. Marina, look, things got heated last night. I get it. You're hurt. But doing this? Cutting off Mom's utilities? It's below you. We're family. Family supports each other. No matter what. You're the successful one. You've been blessed. It's our duty to help those who aren't as fortunate. Mom is old. You can't just leave her high and dry. Please, Just turn the autopay back on and we can talk about this rationally next week. Be the bigger person. You're better than this. I read it twice. The audacity was breathtaking. You've been blessed. As if my career was a lottery win and not 20 years of 80-hour work weeks and missed holidays. Duty, a word they only used when they needed a check. I didn't type a paragraph back. I didn't engage with his philosophy. I didn't argue about who was better. I typed, Grant, if there are specific bills you would like me to pay, please scan the invoices and email them to me so I can file them for my records. I need a paper trail for my accountant. I hit send. I knew he wouldn't do it. Grant was allergic to documentation. He operated on handshakes and, I'll get you back later. Asking for an invoice was like asking a vampire to step into the sunlight. It made the transaction real. It made it debt. 10 minutes passed. No reply from Grant. They were panicking. I could feel it. For years. The dynamic had been simple. They pushed a button. Guilt, shame, anger, and I dispensed cash. Now, they were pushing the buttons, and the machine was just staring back at them, asking for a receipt. Then, the tone of the morning shifted. My laptop, which was still open on the desk from last night, pinged with an email notification. I walked over. It was an automated security alert from the bank that held the Lake Briar renovation account. The joint account I had set up with Mom 4 years ago to manage the contractors, which still had my name on it as a secondary administrator. Subject: Security alert. Access privileges changed. Your access level for account ending in 4590 has been modified. Administrator Darlene Caldwell has attempted to remove Marina Caldwell from the authorized user list. This action is pending verification. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. She was trying to lock me out. She had realized, likely after Haley's screaming subsided, that if I was cutting ties, I might look at the other assets. She knew about the clause, or at least, she remembered enough to be scared. She was trying to scrub my name from the Lake Briar account before I could see what she had done. She was too late. I had already printed the records last night. But her attempt to remove me? That was an act of hostility. That was an act of bad faith. And legally, it was the final nail in her coffin. My phone rang again. This time, it wasn't family. Liam, attorney. I picked up immediately. Merry Christmas, Liam. I apologize for making you work on a holiday. Marina. Liam's voice was brisk, professional, with a hint of confusion. I got your email. I am looking at the documents you sent, but that is not why I am calling. Oh? I just got a call from a lawyer in Burlington, a guy named Henderson. Do you know him? Never heard of him, I said. Well, he represents your mother, Liam said. Apparently, he was retained this morning, on Christmas morning, which tells me they are desperate. What did he want? I asked, walking back to the window. He called to issue a verbal notice, Liam said. They are preparing to file a motion against you. They are claiming that you are attempting to exert undue financial pressure and emotional distress on an elderly woman. And here's the kicker. Marina, they are claiming that the $80,000 you put into Lake Briar was a gift, not an investment, and they are demanding you sign a release of interest or they will sue you for harassment. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a dry, dark laugh. They are going to sue me to make me walk away from the house I fixed? Essentially, Liam said, they are trying to strike first. They think if they threaten a lawsuit, you will back down to avoid the scandal. They don't know you have the renovation contract with the reversion clause, do they? No, I said. They forgot about it. Mom never reads the fine print. She just signs where you tell her to. Well, Liam said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Henderson sounded very confident. He thinks he is dealing with a daughter who is afraid of upsetting her mommy. He doesn't know he's dealing with a secured creditor. What do we do? I asked. We let them file, Liam said. Let them put it on the record. Let them claim it was a gift. Let them claim they have full ownership. Because the moment they file that affidavit, they are committing perjury if the contract says otherwise. And more importantly, by attacking your claim, They are triggering the dispute mechanism in the contract which, let me just check Clause 6. Freezes the asset, I finished for him. Exactly, Liam said. They just walked right into it. Marina, if they had stayed quiet, we would have had to fight to prove the leverage, but by suing you to declare it a gift, they are forcing the court to examine the original contract. They are handing us the keys. Let them come, I said. I want them to bring everything. I want them to bring the deed. I want them to bring the receipts. I want this to be public. I will draft the response, Liam said. I will see you tomorrow. Try to have a decent Christmas, Marina. I am having a great Christmas, Liam, I said. The best one yet. I hung up the phone. I looked around my apartment. It was quiet. It was empty. But for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a fortress. They thought they were calling a repairman to fix the Marina problem. They thought they could yell at me, threaten me, and sue me back into submission. They thought I was the same woman who had sat at the table last night, accepting a pair of socks with a polite nod. They didn't realize that the woman who left that house wasn't a daughter anymore. She was a plaintiff, and the defendants had just accidentally confessed to the crime. 2 days after Christmas, the courier arrived at my office at Northvale Strategy Group. He was a young man, indifferent to the weight of the package he carried, just looking for a signature so he could move on to his next delivery. I signed the digital pad, my hand steady, and took the thick manila envelope. It was heavy, the kind of weight that comes from high-quality bond paper and billable hours. The return address was Henderson and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Burlington, Vermont. I did not open it immediately. I placed it on my desk, right next to my ergonomic keyboard, and finished the quarterly projection report I was working on. I typed the final numbers, hit save, and closed my laptop. Only then did I reach for the letter opener. I slit the top of the envelope and slid out the stack of documents. Petition for declaratory judgment and relief. I started reading. The language was standard legalese, but the narrative it constructed was a work of fiction so audacious it almost impressed me. According to the document, Darlene Caldwell, the plaintiff, was alleging that I, Marina Caldwell, had exercised undue influence and coercive control 4 years ago during the renovation of the Lake Briar property. It claimed that I had taken advantage of an elderly woman's financial distress to force her into an unconscionable agreement. It claimed that the $80,000 I had provided was understood by the family to be a filial gift, and that my recent attempts to enforce the security terms of the contract were tantamount to elder abuse. They were asking the court to void the renovation contract. They wanted to strip me of my security interest in the house. They wanted a judge to declare that the money I spent was a donation, and the house remained 100% Mom's to do with as she pleased. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. It wasn't fear, it was disgust. They were rewriting history. They were taking the moment I saved the family asset, the moment I stepped in when the roof was literally collapsing, and twisting it into a scene of predation. I picked up the phone and called Liam. It arrived, I said when he answered. I have the digital copy Henderson sent over, Liam replied. His voice was uncharacteristically light. Have you read page 4? I am reading the part where they call me a predator, I said, flipping the page. Skip to the relief they are seeking, Liam said. They are specifically asking the court to invalidate the exclusivity clause of the original agreement so that Darlene can retroactively validate a refinancing action. They want to make the loan legal, I said. The loan she took out to buy Haley's townhouse. Exactly, Liam said. They are admitting, in a court filing, that Darlene leveraged the property. They are admitting she took out debt against Lake Briar. They have to admit it, to ask the judge to make it okay. I paused. I looked out the window of my office at the gray Hartford skyline. So they confessed. Better than that, Liam said. They just pushed the button. Marina, grab your copy of the original contract, the one you signed 4 years ago. I pulled the file from my drawer. I have it. Look at Clause 7, subsection C, Liam instructed. The no contest and automatic reversion clause. I found the paragraph. I had read it years ago. but in the blur of contractors and invoices, I had forgotten the specific wording. In the event that the property owner, Darlene Caldwell, initiates any legal action to contest, void, or alter the terms of this security agreement, or attempts to encumber the property in violation of Clause 4 without the investor's consent, such action shall be deemed a material breach and an immediate default. Upon such default, full legal title and possessory rights of the property shall revert ipso facto to the investor, Marina Caldwell, to satisfy the debt and protect the asset value, bypassing standard foreclosure proceedings. I read it twice. Ipso facto, I whispered. By the fact itself, Liam translated. By filing this lawsuit, Darlene has triggered the default. She didn't just breach the contract, she activated the penalty. She is arguing that the contract is invalid, but until a judge says it is invalid, it is still in force, and the contract says that if she tries to sue you to get out of it, she loses the house. She didn't read it, I said. The realization washed over me. Henderson didn't read it either, or he assumed I wouldn't enforce it. He probably thought it was a bluff, Liam said. Or he thought you would be too emotional to pull the trigger, but legally, they just handed you the keys. The moment that clerk stamped their petition, the title transfer mechanism began. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the papers in front of me. They were meant to be a weapon to hurt me, to shame me into submission. Instead, they were a surrender. I didn't feel a rush of joy. I didn't feel the urge to pop a bottle of champagne or dance around the office. I wasn't happy. Happiness implies a lightness, a celebration. This felt heavy. It felt like the sensation of stepping off a rocking boat onto a concrete dock. The dizziness was gone. The constant shifting of reality, the gaslighting, the lies, the moving goalposts had stopped. The ground beneath my feet had finally hardened. So, what happens now? I asked. Do we evict her? We could, Liam said. We could file for immediate possession, but I think we play this out. We need to formalize the transfer. I suggest we meet them, not in court, a settlement conference. Let's look them in the eye and explain what they just did. I don't want to go back to that house, I said. The thought of stepping into that cinnamon-scented trap again made my skin crawl. No, Liam agreed. Neutral ground. There is a diner in Maple Crossing, halfway between here and Cedar Hollow. Public, busy, witnesses. Okay, I said. Set it up. I will call Henderson, Liam said. I will tell him we are open to a discussion regarding the misunderstanding of the contract. He will think you are folding. He will bring them all. Liam, I interrupted. One more thing. Yes? Tell them to bring the deed, I said. The deed Mom gave Haley on Christmas Eve. The one for the townhouse. Why? Liam asked. That is a separate property. Technically, it is not part of the Lake Briar dispute, even if the money came from there. Because I want them to see the line, I said. I want them to see the direct line between the house I saved and the gift Haley got. I want to connect the dots for them on the table. If they want to discuss family assets, let's discuss all of them. Understood, Liam said. I will make it a condition of the meeting. Tomorrow at noon? Tomorrow at noon, I said. I hung up. I looked at the petition for relief one last time. Then, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a fresh, crisp manila folder. I picked up my label maker. I typed 2 words. The truth. The machine whirred and spat out the adhesive strip. I stuck it onto the tab of the folder. I began to gather my documents. The original renovation contract with my signature and Mom's signature. The bank statements showing the $80,000 transfer. The screenshot of the refinance record from the county clerk. And finally, the email from the bank showing Mom's attempt to remove my access yesterday. I placed them inside the folder, one by one. Then, I reached into my bag and pulled out the gray wool socks. I hesitated. Did I really need to bring them? Was it petty? No, it wasn't petty. It was accurate. I didn't put the socks in the folder. They were too bulky. Instead, I placed them in my briefcase, in the front pocket, easily accessible. I stood up and walked to the window again. The city below was moving. thousands of people rushing about their lives, buying late gifts, returning bad ones, arguing with relatives. I wondered how many of them were like me, functioning ATMs for people who resented the transaction fees. I had spent 41 years trying to buy my way into the inner circle of my own family. I had bought roofs, boilers, cars, and dignity, and in return, I was handed a bill for emotional distress. Well, the account was closed. The audit was finished. I wasn't going to Maple Crossing to negotiate. I wasn't going to plead my case. I was going to deliver the closing statement of a lifetime. I turned off the lights in my office. It was only 4 in the afternoon, but the winter sun was already setting, casting long, sharp shadows across the room. I walked out the door, my briefcase heavy in my hand, ready to meet the people who shared my DNA, but not my reality. The diner in Maple Crossing was the kind of establishment that prided itself on not changing since 1955. It smelled of frying bacon, old coffee, and lemon floor wax. It was neutral territory, a place public enough to discourage screaming matches, but noisy enough to drown out a quiet, brutal conversation. Liam and I arrived 15 minutes early. We secured a large booth in the back corner, away from the door but with a clear view of the entrance. Liam ordered a black coffee. I ordered a glass of water. I arranged my files on the Formica table with the precision of a blackjack dealer setting up a new shoe. At 12 o'clock sharp, the bell above the door chimed. They walked in like a procession of the condemned. Mom led the way, wearing her best fur-lined coat, chin held high, attempting to project an air of matriarchal authority that was visibly fraying at the edges. Haley followed, looking less like a property mogul and more like a frightened child, clutching a designer bag to her chest. Grant brought up the rear, looking tired and unshaven, his eyes darting around the diner as if searching for an exit. Beside Mom walked a man in an ill-fitting gray suit. This had to be Henderson. He carried a leather briefcase that looked scuffed, and he had the blustery walk of a man who was used to bullying people in small-town zoning disputes. They approached the booth. No one shook hands. "Marina," Mom said, her voice tight. She didn't sit down immediately. She stood there, looming over the table, trying to use height to her advantage. "This is ridiculous, dragging us out to a diner like criminals. We could have discussed this at home." "Sit down." "Mom," I said. I didn't look up from my water glass. "And Mr. Henderson, I assume?" "James Henderson," the lawyer said, sliding into the booth opposite Liam. He gave me a thin, patronizing smile. "I represent your mother, and I must say, Ms. Caldwell, this entire charade is quite unnecessary. We filed the petition. The court will handle it. Meeting here is irregular." "We are here to save you the embarrassment of a discovery phase," Liam said smoothly. "Please, sit." "Mom." Haley and Grant squeezed into the booth. The table was crowded now. Shoulders brushed, knees bumped. The air grew stifling. "Let's make this quick," Mom said, pulling off her gloves finger by finger. "You are upset about the renovation contract. You think you can hold the lake house hostage because you are jealous of Haley's gift. It is petty. Marina, it is beneath you. You need to sign the release so we can go back to being a family." "Beneath me," I repeated. "You are acting out," Mom continued, her voice gaining that familiar, lecturing cadence. "You have always been difficult when you don't get your way, but threatening to sue your own mother? Over money? It is shameful. You have plenty of money. Why do you need to count every penny I spend?" I didn't answer. I reached for the first folder, the one labeled The Truth, and opened it. I pulled out a document. It wasn't a legal contract. It was a spreadsheet, a comprehensive, color-coded, year-by-year analysis of every single dollar I had transferred to Darlene Caldwell, Grant Caldwell, and Haley Caldwell over the last 12 years. I slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of Grant. "What is this?" Grant asked. "Read the total at the bottom of page 3, I said. Grant picked up the paper. He squinted. His lips moved slightly as he read the number. Then, he stopped. His eyes widened. He looked up at me, then back at the paper. then at Mom. $245,000? Grant whispered. The number hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Marina, you sent this much? That includes the tuition for your kids. Grant, I said softly. The 3 times I paid your car insurance so you wouldn't lose your license, the down payment on Mom's current car, the roof, the boiler, the loans that were never paid back. I didn't know it was that much. Grant stammered. He looked physically ill. He had always told himself I helped out a little. Seeing the $250,000 figure in black and white shattered his denial instantly. It is irrelevant, Henderson barked, waving his hand. Past gifts are not admissible proof of a current contract dispute. A gift is a gift. Ms. Caldwell, you can't ask for a refund on Christmas presents from 10 years ago. I am not asking for a refund, I said. I am establishing a pattern of financial dependency, and I am establishing the source of funds. I turned my gaze to Haley. She was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Haley, I said, do you have the deed? I left it at home. She lied. Her voice was thin. That is fine, I said. I have a copy. 42 Maple Ridge Lane, a lovely townhouse, market value, $200,000. It is my property, Haley said, finding a scrap of courage. Mom gave it to me. It has nothing to do with you. Does it? I asked. I reached into the folder again and pulled out a second stack of papers. This was the envelope I had prepared this morning. Mr. Henderson, I said, addressing the lawyer, you are claiming that the Lake Briar renovation money was a gift. You are also claiming that the purchase of the Maple Ridge townhouse was an independent investment by my mother, made years ago. That is correct, Henderson said, crossing his arms. My client has managed her assets wisely. Then can you explain, I said, sliding the new stack of papers toward Haley, why the property taxes for 42 Maple Ridge Lane for the years 2020, 2021, and 2022 were paid from a checking account ending in 590? Haley frowned. She looked at the paper. It was a tax receipt from the town clerk. Paid. Account ending in 590. I don't know what account that is, Haley said. Mom knows, I said. I looked at Darlene. She had gone very still. Her face, usually so mobile and expressive, was frozen in a mask of tension. That is the family management account, Mom said quickly. The one we use for expenses. The one I funded, I corrected. The one I set up 5 years ago to handle the Lake Briar contractors. The one where I deposited $3,000 every month for maintenance. You told me that money was for the lake house upkeep. You told me it was for taxes on the family home. I leaned forward. You were using my money to pay the taxes and insurance on a secret second property you were hiding from me. You were using my deposits to build equity in Haley's gift. Haley, look at the second page. Haley turned the page. It was an insurance binder for the townhouse. The payer was listed as Marina Caldwell, via joint account. You didn't just give her a house, Mom, I said. You gave her a house that I paid to maintain. I have been subsidizing a landlord business I didn't know existed. Haley looked up. Her face was pale. The deed, the glorious $200,000 ticket to freedom she had flaunted on Christmas Eve, suddenly looked very different. It wasn't a clean asset. It was a stolen one. This is, Haley started, but her voice failed. It is fraud, Liam interjected. His voice was calm, conversational. Misappropriation of funds, constructive trust. If we go to court, Your Honor will not just look at the Lake Briar contract. He will look at the flow of funds for this townhouse. And since Marina can prove she was the sole depositor into that account, and the funds were used for an asset she didn't know about, well, the court might decide that the townhouse doesn't belong to you. Haley, it might decide it belongs to the person who paid for it. You can't do that, Mom snapped. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. I am the mother. I decide how the money is spent. You gave it to me. Once you give it to me, it is mine. Not if you lied about what it was for, I said. That is called theft by deception. Henderson cleared his throat. He looked nervous now. He realized he wasn't dealing with a family spat. He was dealing with a forensic accounting trail that led directly to his client's fraud. "Now, look," Henderson said, his bluster gone. "Let's not throw around criminal terms. Perhaps there was a lack of transparency regarding the allocation of funds. But surely, Ms. Caldwell, you don't want to drag your sister into a legal battle over a few tax bills?" "I don't want to," I said. "But you filed a petition yesterday calling me a predator. You invited the court to look at our finances. I am just bringing the exhibits." I pulled out the final piece of paper, the screenshot of the security alert. "And just so we are clear on intent," I said, "yesterday, at 9:45 in the morning, someone logged into the bank portal for account 590 and attempted to remove my administrative access. They also tried to delete the transaction history for the last 3 years." I placed the screenshot in the center of the table. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I am sure you know that attempting to destroy evidence after litigation has been threatened, or in this case, implicitly started, is a sanctionable offense. Spoliation of evidence." Grant looked at the screenshot. He looked at Mom. "Mom," Grant said, his voice horrified. "You tried to delete the bank records?" "I was just cleaning up the files," Mom cried, her defense crumbling into desperation. "It was messy. I didn't want Marina to be confused." "I am not confused. Mom," I said, "I am clearer than I have ever been." The silence that descended on the booth was absolute. The noise of the diner, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the espresso machine faded into the background. Haley dropped the papers. She pushed them away from her as if they were contaminated. "I don't want it," Haley whispered. "What?" Mom whipped her head around. "The deed," Haley said, her voice trembling but rising in volume. "The townhouse. I don't want it. If she paid for it, if it is all messed up in this, I don't want it. I am not going to get sued because you lied to her, Mom." "Haley, don't be stupid," Mom hissed. "It is $200,000. "It is stolen money," Haley shouted. Heads turned in the diner. A waitress paused with a coffee pot in midair. Haley stood up. She looked at me. There was no triumph in her eyes now, no smugness, just fear and a sudden, crushing realization of how precarious her golden child status actually was. She realized that the gold was just paint, and underneath, it was all rot. "I didn't know," Haley said to me. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "I swear, Rena, I thought she bought it with Dad's insurance money. I didn't know she was using your account." "I believe you," I said, and I did. Haley was many things, spoiled, entitled, lazy, but she wasn't a mastermind. She was just a prop Mom used to hurt me. "Sit down. Haley," Mom commanded. "Stop making a scene." "No," Haley said. She grabbed her bag. "I am going to the car. Fix this. Mom, just fix it." She walked out. The bell chimed again. A lonely sound. Grant sat there, staring at the spreadsheet. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down and realized he was holding the matches. 245,000, he muttered again. He looked at me. "I'm sorry, Marina. I should have asked. I just let you pay. Because it was easier." "Yes," I said. "It was easier." I turned to Henderson. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "So," I said, "Mr. Henderson, regarding that petition you filed, do you still think it is in your client's best interest to proceed? Or should we discuss the terms of surrender?" Mom looked at me. Her eyes were full of hate, pure, unadulterated venom. But behind the hate, there was fear. For the first time in her life, she was looking at me and seeing someone she couldn't control, couldn't manipulate, and couldn't guilt. She was seeing a woman who had the receipts. "You are a cold-hearted witch," Mom whispered. "I am a practical woman," I replied. "And I believe, Mom, that you are sitting in my booth." Grant stood up. He looked out the window where Haley was sitting in her car. her head resting against the steering wheel. "I am going to get her," Grant said, his voice heavy with a sudden, weary maturity. "She needs to hear the rest of this. If we are doing this, if we are tearing the house down, she needs to see the blueprints." "Sit down, Grant," Mom snapped, her eyes darting between me and the exit. "She is upset. Let her be." "No," Grant said. He didn't look at Mom. He looked at me. "You are right. Marina, about the money, I didn't want to know. So I didn't ask. But I am asking now." He walked out to the parking lot. Through the glass, I saw him tap on Haley's window. They argued for a moment. Sharp, jerky gestures, before Haley finally opened the door and stepped out into the cold. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself, shivering not just from the wind, but from the shock of having her reality dismantled. When they returned to the booth, Haley didn't sit next to Mom. She grabbed a chair from a nearby table and pulled it to the end of the booth, positioning herself so she could look at everyone. Her eyes were red, but dry. "Okay," Haley said, her voice raspy. "I am back. Tell me what else is a lie." "Nothing is a lie," Mom said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Marina is just twisting things. She is trying to make me look like a villain because I tried to help you." "Help her?" I asked. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on top of the file folder labeled The Truth. "Mom, you didn't help her. You crippled her, and you used my credit score to do it." "What does that mean?" Haley asked, looking at me. I turned to Liam. He nodded, understanding the cue. "Ms. Caldwell," Liam began, addressing the table with the calm authority of a man who charges $400 an hour. "My client is not here to litigate the fairness of a Christmas gift. We are not interested in the townhouse deed itself. Keep it, sell it, burn it. That is between you and the IRS. We are here to correct the record regarding the financial structure of this family." "Get to the point," Henderson grumbled, though he was furiously taking notes. "The point," I said, taking over, "is the narrative. For 20 years, Mom, you have told everyone, Aunt Sarah, the neighbors, the church group, that I am the cold, distant daughter who relies on the family for emotional stability. You paint me as the taker, and you paint Haley as the giver." "I never said that." Mom lied. I reached into the folder. I pulled out a document dated 3 years ago. It was a loan agreement for the sunroom addition on the main house in Cedar Hollow. "Do you remember this?" I asked. Mom stared at the paper. She didn't speak. "This is the loan for the sunroom," I told Haley. "Cost, $45,000. Mom didn't qualify for the loan on her own because her debt-to-income ratio was too high. She asked me to co-sign. Actually, she asked me to be the primary borrower, and she would be the co-signer. I agreed. I signed the papers. I paid the monthly installments for 2 years until it was paid off." I looked at Haley. "But that is not the interesting part," I continued. "The interesting part is what Mom told everyone at the Thanksgiving dinner that year, the one I couldn't attend because I was working overtime to pay for this loan. She told everyone that the sunroom was your gift to the family. She said you used the money from that commercial you booked to build it." Haley's mouth opened slightly. "The yogurt commercial? That paid $600. Rena, I spent that on headshots." "Exactly," I said. "But the family didn't know that. They all toasted you. They all talked about how generous Haley is, how successful Haley is. Meanwhile, I was the one wiring the checks, and Mom was telling people I was too busy chasing my career to care about the house." You told them I paid for it?" Haley looked at Mom, horror dawning on her face. "Mom, why would you do that? It makes me look like a liar." "I was protecting your image," Mom shouted. She had lost her composure now. The mask of the dignified matriarch was gone, replaced by a cornered, desperate woman. "You were struggling. You were feeling down because you weren't getting roles. I just wanted you to feel proud. I wanted the family to respect you." "So you stole my credit to buy her respect?" I asked. "You didn't need it." Mom turned on me, her eyes wet with angry tears. "You have everything. Marina, you have the job, the apartment, the money. You are strong. You don't need people to clap for you. Haley needs that. She is sensitive. Why are you so greedy that you need the credit too? The words hung in the diner, vibrating in the silence. You don't need people to clap for you. I don't need applause, Mom, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than her shouting. I needed a mother. I needed to know that my value to you wasn't just the balance in my bank account, but you took my money, gave it to Haley, and then told me I was the one who was a burden. I never said you were a burden, Mom sobbed. I said you rely on us. For what? I asked. For love? Is that what I was buying? Because if I have to pay $245,000 for love, Mom, and I still get socks for Christmas, then the price is too high. I am priced out of this market. Grant put his head in his hands. God, he breathed. I didn't know about the sunroom. I told my wife. I told her Haley paid for it. I made her feel bad because she couldn't contribute like Haley did. He looked up at me, his face pale. He realized how deep the rot went. He realized that every time he had praised Haley, he had unknowingly slapped me in the face. And he realized that if this went to court, if the forensic accountants started digging, they might find the checks he had accepted too. We need to stop this, Grant said. Right now, Mr. Henderson, what do we do? Henderson looked at the documents on the table. He looked at the spreadsheet. He looked at the loan agreement. He closed his briefcase. Ms. Caldwell, Henderson said to Mom, you have a significant exposure here. If your daughter pursues a constructive trust claim on the townhouse or a fraud claim regarding the account access, you could be looking at criminal charges, not to mention the tax evasion implications if these gifts weren't reported. Mom went pale. Criminal? We are offering a settlement, Liam interjected smoothly, to avoid all of that. What do you want? Haley asked. She was looking at me, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't looking at me as a rival or a bank. She was looking at me with fear. She realized that I held her future in my hands. I don't want the townhouse, I said. Keep it. Pay the taxes yourself. Learn how to be a landlord. Maybe it will be good for you. Haley let out a breath she had been holding. And I don't want the money back, I continued. I am writing off the $245,000 as a bad debt. Consider it the final severance package. Then what? Mom asked, suspicious. What is the catch? 2 things, I said. I held up 2 fingers. First, I said, you will sign a document, prepared by Liam, stating that the Lake Briar renovation was funded by me, and that due to your breach of contract, the title reverts to me immediately. No contest, no filial gift nonsense. The lake house is mine. Grant, Haley, you can visit if you are invited. Mom, you are not invited. Mom flinched as if I had struck her. You are banning me from your father's house? My house, I corrected. I paid for the walls that are keeping it standing, and since you tried to leverage it behind my back to buy favor with Haley, you have lost the privilege of entry. And the second thing? Henderson asked, looking at his watch, anxious to get away from this disaster. Restitution of access, I said. You tried to lock me out of the joint account to hide your tracks. You will restore my administrative access immediately so I can download the full history for my tax records. Then, and only then, will I close the account and transfer the remaining balance to you. I want a clean audit trail. Is that it? Grant asked. No, I said. One more thing, a clause in the settlement. I looked at Mom. I wanted her to hear this clearly. The non-disparagement clause, I said. If I hear one word, one single whisper, to Aunt Sarah, to the neighbors, or to anyone in Cedar Hollow that implies I am relying on this family, or that I am unstable, or that I am anything other than the person who kept this family from bankruptcy for a decade, I will sue you for defamation, and I will use the spreadsheet as Exhibit A. Mom stared at me. Her lip quivered. She looked small. She looked defeated, but she also looked angry. She couldn't believe that her tool, her utility, had developed a voice. You are humiliating me, she whispered, in front of my children, in front of strangers. You are enjoying this. You are trying to break me." I felt a surge of emotion, but it wasn't the guilt she was hoping for. It was a fierce, burning pride. I had spent my life afraid of this woman's disapproval. I had spent my life trying to manage her moods, to cushion her falls. I had let her walk all over me because I thought that was what good daughters did. "No, Mom," I said gently. "I am not humiliating you. I am ending the humiliation you have inflicted on me." I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the gray wool socks. They were still in their original packaging, the cheap cardboard band wrapped around the ankle. I placed them in the center of the table, right on top of the pile of damning evidence. The gray wool stood out against the white paper. It was a stark, ugly contrast. "You gave me these," I said. "You said they were practical. You said they were what I needed." The table was silent. Grant couldn't look at the socks. Haley stared at them as if they were a loaded gun. Even Henderson seemed to understand the gravity of the object. "You were right," I said. "They were exactly what I needed. Because when I looked at them, I finally saw what you saw when you looked at me." I stood up. I buttoned my coat. "I am keeping the deed to my life, Mom," I said. "You can keep the socks. Maybe they will keep you warm when the heating bill comes due next month." I nodded to Liam. He closed his folder. "We will have the papers sent to Mr. Henderson's office by 5 o'clock, Liam said. "We expect them signed by tomorrow morning, or we file the fraud complaint." "They will be signed," Henderson said quickly. I didn't look at Mom again. I didn't look at Haley or Grant. I turned and walked toward the door of the diner. For the first time in years, my steps felt light. I wasn't walking away from a fight. I was walking away from a job I had never applied for. And finally, quitting. The bell chimed as I pushed the door open. A sound that signaled not an entrance, but an exit, a permanent one. I had my hand on the cold brass handle of the diner door, ready to step out into the parking lot and leave the wreckage of my family behind me. The bell above me jangled slightly as I pushed, but before I could cross the threshold, Liam's voice cut through the diner's low hum like a razor wire. "Just one moment," Liam said. He hadn't closed his briefcase. He was looking at Henderson, his expression mild, but his eyes hard. "Before we adjourn, there is the matter of the encumbrance on the Maple Ridge property. We need to clarify who is servicing that debt moving forward." I stopped. I turned around slowly. The relief that had just begun to settle on Haley's face, the relief of keeping her property even if she felt guilty about it, vanished instantly. She looked at her lawyer, then at Mom. "What debt?" Haley asked, her voice trembling. "Mom said the house was paid for. She said she bought it years ago." Henderson looked down at his files, shuffling papers nervously. "Well, there is a standard mortgage instrument attached to the title, yes, but it is in good standing." "It is a variable rate mortgage," Liam corrected him, looking at a document in his hand, "with a balloon payment due in 18 months, and more importantly, it carries a personal guarantee." I walked back to the booth. I didn't sit down. I stood at the end of the table, looming over them like a judge who had just found a mistake in the sentencing guidelines. "Haley," I said softly, "do you know who the guarantor is on that loan?" Haley shook her head. "Mom?" "No," I said. "Me?" The silence that followed was absolute. Mom stared at the table, her jaw set in a rigid line. Grant looked at me with his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't process the sheer scale of the entanglement. 5 years ago, I said, my voice calm and steady. Mom came to me with a stack of papers. She said she was refinancing the main house to get a better rate for her retirement. She said the bank needed a secondary signature just for procedural reasons because of her age. She said it was a formality. I signed it because I trusted her. I didn't read the fine print on the rider. I looked at Mom. She refused to meet my eyes. "I wasn't signing for the main house," I said. "I was signing a guarantee for a commercial loan to purchase the townhouse, 42 Maple Ridge Lane. I have been the financial backbone of that property since the day it was bought. If the payments are missed, the bank doesn't come for Mom. They come for me." Haley looked at Mom. her eyes wide with betrayal. You made Marina co-sign for my gift? Without telling her? It was strategy, Mom snapped, finally looking up, her eyes blazing with a desperate, twisted logic. I wanted to make sure the property was secure. Marina has the credit score. If I had put it in my name alone, the interest rate would have been double. I was being smart. No, Mom, I said. You were being cruel. You wanted Haley to have the glory of the asset, and you wanted me to have the weight of the liability. You set it up so that I would be tethered to Haley's success forever. If she failed, I would have to pay to save her. Just to save my own credit. It was a trap to keep me in line. It is not a trap, Mom cried. It is family insurance, and it worked, didn't it? The payments were made. By me, I reminded her. From the joint account you stole from. Henderson cleared his throat. Well, regardless of the history, the deed has been transferred to Haley. The guarantee remains with Marina Caldwell. That is a binding contract with the bank. So really, nothing changes. Marina is still liable. Mom smiled. It was a small, triumphant twitch of her lips. She thought she still had me. She thought that even if I walked away, even if I cut off the utilities, I was still legally chained to this $200,000 anchor. Actually, I said, reaching into my inside pocket, that is why I came back to the table. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was stamped with the seal of a notary public. Liam, I said, explain the due on sale clause to them. Liam smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood. Most commercial mortgages, Liam said, addressing Henderson, contain a clause stating that if the title of the property is transferred to a new owner without the lender's prior written consent, the entire loan balance becomes immediately due and payable. Furthermore, the transfer of title constitutes a material change in the risk profile of the borrower. I placed the paper on the table. When you handed Haley that deed on Christmas Eve, I said to Mom, you didn't just give her a house. You triggered a default event with the lender. You broke the terms of the mortgage. So, Mom challenged, they don't know. They do now, I said. I faxed them the deed transfer this morning. Mom's face went white. It was the color of old ash. You told the bank? I had to, I said, to protect myself. See, this document on the table is a notice of novation and release, since the property was transferred without my consent as the guarantor, and since the new owner, Haley, has a different financial profile, I petitioned the bank to remove my name from the loan effective immediately. They agreed. They are not interested in holding a guarantor liable for a property she no longer has an interest in, especially when the transfer was done surreptitiously. I leaned in closer. I am out, Mom. The bank released me at 9 o'clock this morning. I am no longer the guarantor. What does that mean for me? Haley whispered. She looked terrified. It means, Liam said, closing his file with a final, decisive snap, that the bank will be contacting you, the new owner, to refinance the loan immediately. You will need to qualify for the mortgage on your own merits. Haley, based on your income, your credit score, your assets. Haley let out a small, strangled sound. We all knew Haley's credit score. We all knew her income was sporadic at best. There was no way a bank would lend her $200,000. They will foreclose, Haley said. They will take the house. Probably, I said, unless you can pay the full balance in cash within 30 days. Mom stood up. She was shaking. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. You did this on purpose, she hissed at me. You knew. You knew if you told the bank, they would call the loan. You destroyed her gift. You destroyed everything out of spite. I didn't destroy it, I said calmly. I just removed the artificial support that was holding it up. You built a house of cards, Mom, and you used my back as the table. I just stood up. You are evil, Mom spat. You are jealous and you are evil. You couldn't stand that Haley had something of her own. She can have it, I said, my voice rising for the first time, sharp and cutting. She has the deed. It is right there in her purse. She owns the house. All I did was give her the bill that goes with it. Why is that evil, Mom? Why is it evil to expect the owner to pay for what they own? Or did you just assume that I would keep paying for a house I wasn't allowed to visit? It is family, Grant interjected, his voice weak, trying to mediate a war that was already lost. Marina, come on. There has to be a way to fix this. Maybe you can just stay on the loan for a few months? Until Haley gets on her feet? I looked at Grant. He was sweating. He was realizing that if Haley lost the house, she would move back in with Mom. And if Mom had no money because I stopped the transfers, they would both come to him. Grant, I said cold, be quiet. I turned back to Mom. You want to talk about evil? I asked. Let's talk about the unauthorized access log again. I tapped the screenshot I had left on the table earlier. When I was on the phone with the bank this morning, I said, securing my release, I mentioned that there had been suspicious activity on the linked accounts. They were very interested. They asked if I wanted to file a formal report regarding identity theft and unauthorized banking attempts. Mom stopped breathing. Her eyes darted to Henderson. I told them to hold off, I said. For now, but that report is sitting in my draft folder. If you push me, if you try to fight the Lake Briar reversion, or if you try to guilt me about this mortgage, I will file it. And federal banking fraud is not something Henderson can fix for you. Henderson looked at Mom. He looked sick. He realized his client had not only lied to him, but had exposed him to a case that was radioactive. Ms. Caldwell, Henderson said to Mom, his voice stiff. We need to leave. Now. We need to discuss your options regarding the bank. I am not leaving, Mom shrieked. She has to fix this. She is the one with the money. The money is gone. Mom, I said. The well is dry. The bank is closed. I picked up my gloves. I smoothed them out, taking my time. Haley, I said, looking at my sister. She was crying silently now, tears dripping onto her designer coat. You wanted to be treated like an adult. You wanted the deed. You wanted the big girl gift. Congratulations. You have it. You own a property worth $200,000. You also own the debt. That is what ownership means. It means the buck stops with you. I can't pay it, Haley sobbed. Then sell it, I said. Or get a roommate. Or get a job. It is not my problem anymore. I looked at the three of them one last time. They looked small, huddled together in the booth, bound by their shared panic and incompetence. They looked like strangers. I told you last night, I said, my voice low and final. I am done being the safety net. If you want the deed, keep it. But from today on, every single risk, every bill, every consequence is yours. You wanted to cut me out of the picture? Fine, I have cropped myself out. I turned to Liam. Let's go. This time, when I walked to the door, no one called me back. The silence in the diner was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of reality crashing down on people who had spent a lifetime avoiding it. I pushed the door open and stepped into the winter air. It was biting cold, but it felt amazing. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sharp, clean oxygen. Behind me, in the warm, greasy air of the diner, my mother was losing her kingdom. But out here, in the cold, I had just found my life. Liam did not pack up his briefcase. He reached into the back partition and pulled out a document that was stapled in blue legal backing. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the capstone to the fortress of paper we had built around the table. He laid it flat on the formica surface, smoothing it out with his palm. This, Liam announced, his voice carrying the weight of a judge's gavel, is the affirmation of reversion. It is a formal acknowledgement that the conditions of the original renovation contract have been triggered. By signing this, you agree that the title to the Lake Briar property has reverted to Marina Caldwell effective immediately, and you waive any right to future contest. I took the expensive fountain pen from my pocket. I uncapped it. The motion was deliberate, almost ritualistic. I leaned over the table, not bothering to sit back down in the booth. I signed my name on the bottom line with a flourish. The ink was dark and permanent. I turned the document toward Mom. Your turn, I said. Mom looked at the paper, then she looked at Henderson. She was searching for an escape hatch, a loophole, a way to spin this so she could walk out the victim. But Henderson was not looking at her. He was looking at his shoes, likely calculating how quickly he could disengage from a client who had committed bank fraud. Mr. Henderson, Liam said pleasantly, please advise your client of her options. Option A. She signs the affirmation, withdraws her petition for relief, and immediately restores Marina's administrative access to the joint accounts for a final audit. We walk away, and the criminal complaints regarding the identity theft and bank fraud remain unfiled. Liam paused, letting the silence stretch until it was thin and brittle. Option B, he continued, his voice dropping a register, becoming colder. She refuses. We file the motion for summary judgment on the house. We file the police report regarding the unauthorized access to the bank accounts. We submit the evidence of the false financial statements made to the lender regarding the townhouse mortgage. And we let the district attorney decide if Darlene Caldwell, pillar of the community, looks better in a pantsuit or an orange jumpsuit. Mom flinched. It was a visceral reaction, a physical recoil as if she had been slapped. For 68 years, Darlene Caldwell had operated on the premise that she was untouchable because she was a mother. She believed her title gave her immunity. She believed that no matter how much she took, no matter how much she lied, family would always cover the crime. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, and for the first time, I saw the fear. It wasn't the fear of losing money. It was the fear of exposure. She realized that her power over me had never been about love. It had been about my silence. And now that I was speaking, she was naked. You wouldn't, Mom whispered. You wouldn't send your mother to jail. I wouldn't have to, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. You sent yourself there when you logged into my account and tried to delete the evidence. I am just the witness. Haley let out a sob. It was a jagged, ugly sound. She wasn't crying because she loved me. She wasn't crying because she felt bad for Mom. She was crying because the $200,000 deed in her purse, which she had thought was her golden ticket, was now a millstone around her neck. She realized that the game was over, and she was the one left holding the losing hand. Just sign it, Mom, Haley choked out. Please, I can't deal with the police. I can't have this on my record. I have auditions. Grant? Mom looked at her son, her golden boy. Grant couldn't look at her. He was staring at the spreadsheet of his own debts that I had left on the table. He knew that if this went to a criminal investigation, the forensic accountants would ask about the loans he had received from the misappropriated funds. He was terrified. Mom, Grant said, his voice cracking. Do what she says. Just end it. Mom looked around the table. Her allies had deserted her. Her manipulation tactics had run out of fuel. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly that the tip of the pen rattled against the paper. She signed. It was a messy, jagged signature, nothing like the elegant script she usually used on Christmas cards. It was the signature of a defeated woman. Liam took the document. He checked the signature, blew on the ink to dry it, and placed it securely back in his briefcase. Thank you, Liam said. The administrative access? Mom pulled out her phone. Her fingers fumbled with the screen. She opened the banking app. She tapped a few times, her face gray. Done, she whispered. You are back on. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification. Access restored. Good, I said. I stood straight. The diner seemed brighter now, the air clearer. I looked at the three of them. They looked like a tableau of misery. But it wasn't my misery anymore. I had returned it to the rightful owners. One last thing, I said, before I walk out that door. I looked at Grant, then Haley, and finally, I locked eyes with Mom. From this moment forward, I said, enunciating every word, the Bank of Marina is closed, permanently. There will be no more transfers, no more covering the overdrafts, no more loans for roofs or cars or dreams. If you want money from me, you will go to a bank. And if you ever, ever tell anyone that I rely on this family for anything other than a headache, I will publish that spreadsheet in the town gazette." "Marina," Grant said, standing up halfway. He looked desperate. Can we talk outside? Just for a minute? Privately?" I looked at my brother. I knew what he wanted. He wanted to apologize without witnesses. He wanted to smooth things over, to tell me he loved me, to keep a tiny back channel open just in case he needed help next month. He wanted to whisper so the lawyer wouldn't hear. "No, Grant," I said. "We are done whispering." "But it is family business," he pleaded. "This is family business," I said, gesturing to the legal documents and the receipts scattered on the table. "And the truth is family business too. There are no more sidebars, no more secret deals. If you have something to say to me, you say it in front of the lawyer and the receipts, or you don't say it at all." Grant sank back into the booth. He had nothing to say that could survive the light of day. Mom sat in silence. She was staring at her hands. She looked like an actress who had been standing center stage when the curtain was suddenly ripped down, revealing the ropes and pulleys and the empty auditorium. She had lost her audience. I picked up the notepad I had brought with me. I tore off a single sheet of paper. I took the pen and wrote one line. Then, I reached into my bag for the last time. I pulled out the gray wool socks. I placed them gently on the table, right next to Mom's untouched cup of coffee. I placed the note on top of them. The socks looked small and sad, but to me, they were beautiful. They were the receipt for my freedom. I read the note aloud, so there would be no confusion. "Socks keep the feet warm. The law keeps the life warm." I capped the pen and put it back in my pocket. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. "Enjoy the socks. They are very practical." I turned around. Liam was already holding the door open for me. I walked toward the exit. The sound of my boots on the linoleum floor was rhythmic, steady, strong. I walked past the counter where the waitress was watching with wide eyes. I walked past the families eating their holiday lunches, oblivious to the dynasty that had just crumbled in the back booth. I stepped out into the winter air. The wind was blowing, kicking up swirls of snow, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a fire in my chest, a clean, bright burn of self-respect. I didn't look back at the window. I didn't check to see if they were watching me. I didn't care if they were crying, or arguing, or plotting. It didn't matter. The contract was signed. The boundaries were drawn in ink and steel. For 20 years, I had walked into that family feeling like a beggar, hoping for a crumb of affection. Today, I walked out as the owner of my own life. I reached my car. I unlocked the door. I got in and started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the diner and the Caldwell family in my rearview mirror, I realized something. The road ahead was covered in snow, slippery and dangerous, but for the first time, I was the one driving, and I knew exactly where I was going. The door closed, the story ended, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it brought you as much satisfaction as it brought Marina. Please comment below and let us know where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Marina's decision. If you enjoyed this family drama, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video so this story can be heard by even more people. Stay strong. And remember, keep your receipts.